All right, so let's talk about the Undertaker Last Ride documentary. Really good documentary. The theme of this documentary seems to be, well, there seem to be two or three themes. One is Undertaker's vulnerability, his ability to basically talk about all the things that have been going on over the last couple of years, and how he feels about still wrestling and continuing to wrestle in today's world that is kind of, it's kind of passing him by. The second theme is confidence. How important confidence is in his performances and to his self-esteem and his mental state, which I think is something that a lot of people overlook when it comes to wrestling. They really don't think that confidence is really all that important because they think that you're going through a script. But, these things are very important. And the third thing is, he's worried about embarrassment, humiliation. And these things are, this is probably one of the most important things that is going on in the story and seems to be a part of the story going forward. And was really important leading up to this because a lot of people have felt that he stayed around too long. So let's kind of get into this documentary. So the first thing I want to notice is a couple of weeks ago, maybe over a month or so ago, there was some hubbub about Undertaker wearing a Blue Lives Matter t-shirt. And this is where that footage came from, apparently. It came from the shooting of this documentary. And if you have a problem with that, I don't understand why. The killing of police officers is a problem. So if you have a problem, if you think that's a big deal, I don't know what to say. But I already said my issue in a previous video on Undertaker wearing a Blue Lives Matter t-shirt. I don't care. So let's just get that out the way first. Second is I'm actually this documentary has been in progress for a really long time because they have Chris Jericho in this documentary and Jim Ross, and they haven't been around in a long time. And so this has been going on. This has been a 3-year project that they have been putting together, and it shows. There's a lot of backstage stuff going on, but one of the most telling things, and this actually took place early in the documentary, is Undertaker says, he says, "I used to be tough. What happened? Basically, I'm not tough anymore." And of course, the answer is he just got old. Age caught up with him. But the way he framed it is really important to me. He said, like, I used to be tough. Like I used to be able to do this stuff. Used to be able to hang. I used to be able to do a lot more. I used to, and you could just say you can replace toughness with anything. Like I used to be stronger, used to be faster, used to be smarter. But now, what happened? What's taking place? And it's just age. That's the answer is, it's hard. It's hard to continue doing this over the years. And that's the central theme of the documentary is how long, how does 30 years in the business wear on your body? And this shows him being very vulnerable because you see him like talking to the medical staff, see him talking to Vince, you see him limping around WrestleMania 33, he's limping around in the backstage area. He's kind of got like a hunch to him. He's worried. He's getting, I think, cortisol shots in his knees. It's like you really see that it becomes this project to get him together for one match per year. And I like that they used the psychology of, it was Undertaker, Triple H, and Austin that was having this conversation about wrestling once a year. It's actually worse than wrestling, over and over again because, with Austin, I think he called it ring calluses or bump calluses or something like that, where you get used to taking bumps over night in and night out. But once it's only once a year, it feels worse than it really is. And Triple H, said this as well, that, some of the hardest stuff he's ever had to do was wrestling once every couple of months because, you kind of get used to not being in the ring. And the Undertaker talked about, the timing, the ring rust, and things like that. And it's very important, very interesting that we look into stuff like that when we evaluate, abilities and talent. I mean, obviously ring rust when you're not in the ring is going to be important, but we don't really understand how how that goes as far as ring rust. When you're still wrestling, time in and time out. Like, we don't know how much in-ring stuff that they've done up until the point they actually get in the ring. Like, we know that they do a lot of gym work, but we don't really know how much actual in-ring stuff that they do. Do they go through, rehearsals? They're probably not that much in the way of rehearsals because you don't want to get hurt, which is something he was talking about during his workout before WrestleMania 33. He's like, this is the last workout, and you don't want to get hurt in your last workout. So you don't know, like, if they're doing heavy rehearsals, and they're certainly not taking a lot of too many bumps and stuff like that because you don't want to risk getting injured. But that was really interesting to me, is that this toughness was something that was brought in, and it was stated right off the beginning that, maybe I'm not tough anymore. And Michelle McCool goes on later in the documentary about all the things that he had to put up with. Like, she, in an interview with the New York Post, said he's had like 15 surgeries. He had both hips replaced. He was set on fire at the Elimination Chamber. I think it was 2010 when he got burned. The very serious concussion at WrestleMania 30. They went into some detail about that and how that took a lot out of him. When in the match with Brock, when he got that serious concussion, he said he couldn't remember who he was from. I think he said like 12 hours of information vanished. He said from the concussion at WrestleMania 30, he said he didn't remember anything from 3:30 in the morning, from 3:30 in the afternoon. He didn't remember the match at all. He didn't remember setting up or anything like that. And then Michelle McCool said he didn't remember his name until 4 a.m. And that's scary. That should have been, that probably should have been it, I don't understand what test that he took that got him back in the ring that Christian couldn't get back in the ring. Because if you lose your memory for 12 fucking hours or something like that, I don't understand that, and maybe he didn't lose all of his memory. Maybe it was just he didn't remember the match itself and, what was going on around that time. But that's a huge gap of time to go missing, and so it kind of begs the question of how bad other people with brain injuries. Because I think Daniel Bryan had to retire not too long after that, after WrestleMania 30. So you have to ask, like, how bad were these concussions? Like, how bad was Alexa Bliss's concussions that she was out of the ring for so long? And, they was basically had treated her like she was Charlie Caruso or something like that, where she basically all she did was talk. And then you had, Daniel Bryan had to retire. And, Christian, they kind of silently retired him. They just not bringing him back, But, you had this guy who, I know it's a different stature and everything. Undertaker is a bigger star than Christian and Alexa Bliss and all them. But you kind of have to ask the question, what was the major difference other than star power? That if he lost so much information, which pretty much is almost a whole day of his life, it's like half a day of his life missing. Like, that's some scary shit. But they talked about that. He talked about the injuries. I used to be tough, and now he's not. Doesn't consider himself tough anymore. And also in the Michelle McCool documentary, not the documentary, but in the interview she did for the New York Post, she talked about how Undertaker used to no-sell all his injuries. Like, he would have a match, it would be ugly, it would do some ugly spots, but he'll always say afterwards, like, I'm good, I'm okay. And then she said after the match with Goldberg in Saudi Arabia, he started complaining about his back and stuff like that. Like, he was being openly more verbal in his complaints about the things that are going on with his body. And she said that was kind of weird. And, that was like the first time he had really put it into words how much pain he was in. And that's something that I also thought was very interesting because, when you do have a guy and he's starting to, and he never complains about things, and now he's starting to, you kind of have to say, okay, well, maybe he is near the end. So the I used to be tough part of the documentary was, and looking at how, he doesn't really, maybe not consider himself tough anymore. Or maybe he's considered himself tough, but He just knows that with age comes, these injuries come worse than they used to. And with the age comes the injuries. And with injuries comes, a substantial loss of confidence. And this is something that I thought was very interesting because it's something that I saw in the Ric Flair documentaries as well. There's a lot of Ric Flair documentaries out there. A lot of them. The ESPN one and the WWE documentaries, and I think the Four Horsemen documentary that he also did. But one of the recurring themes is that Ric Flair said that, he just didn't have the confidence when he came to the WWE in 2002. When he came back after WCW folded, he just felt like an old man. He just felt washed up. He didn't feel like Ric Flair anymore. And I saw somebody say this online that they don't take WWE documentaries seriously because they always try to make Triple H sound like a wise sage. And I say, well, the guy's 50. I'm pretty sure he knows something about the world that he lives in and about the business that he works in. And he can pretty much, you can tell and look at people and know that something is wrong with them. And Ric Flair said that Triple H was one of the guys who helped him with his confidence when he was in trouble during the early part of his return to the WWE. And I think this kind of encapsulated with the Ric Flair Triple H match that was on Raw. And Ric Flair said, like, I felt like myself again. And he was able to go and, I think, work with Undertaker after that. And he said he kind of started to feel like, the Nature Boy was back. And then it kind of went away again, age essentially just catches up with you. And I think part of that is also that, you are critiqued brutally online. And I'm not a big cyberbullying guy. I think that if you don't want to hear, people criticizing you, just walk away, delete your Twitter or delete your Instagram. But these guys are abused online for any type of bad performance. And I think this is kind of what happened with Undertaker, is that he had a bad performance at WrestleMania 30. He was concussed. And it did damage his confidence because it was not a good match. And people thought it was the last match that he was going to have. And then he had put so much pressure on himself in the Bray Wyatt match to come back and to erase that bad match that he had with Brock Lesnar. He had to erase it. He had to go out there and redeem himself. And so he put so much pressure on himself that he kind of didn't really, couldn't enjoy it. And then he said, like, okay, after talking to Triple H, the wise sage, as some dude talked about it online, that he started to sort of getting his groove back. And he started really kind of feeling it. But the injuries would beat him down. And he was not sure he was able to continue doing what he does at the level that he's used to, because he's got so many injuries. And I think that's also why when you watch the documentary, he's going into the Roman Reigns match, he seems very, people ask him how he is, and he would just kind of put it off like, we'll see later, we'll talk about it, some other time or whatever, or I'm hanging in there. He wouldn't say, like, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling all right. He didn't have that confidence that physically he was going to be able to hold up. And then he didn't hold up. Like, to me, they made it sound like the Undertaker Roman Reigns match was Warrior versus Hogan from Halloween Havoc, or some of the worst horse shit you've ever seen in your life. Undertaker versus Goldberg. That's fucking Saudi Arabia. But it wasn't that bad of a match. But Undertaker himself was so unhappy with it. And it made me want to go watch it again. Like, I really kind of want to go watch and see what he saw. Because outside of him dropping Roman on the tombstone, where he kind of let Roman slip away, I didn't see that match being all that bad. Like, I think that it was good. It wasn't up to the level of either one of them, because Roman has had better matches. Undertaker definitely has had better matches. But it wasn't a terrible, god-awful match to the point where it crushed his confidence. And I think that match still did crush his confidence, that he didn't feel like he openly said it. He didn't feel like he gave Roman the performance that Roman deserved. And he felt like he wanted to give him a better send-off, or a better, he wanted to give himself a better send-off and give Roman a bigger push. And he didn't feel like he was able to do that. And now he feels like he has to be on the road to redemption. And I guess that's what all of the stuff since the Roman Reigns match has been about. But I'm pretty sure the Goldberg match happened after the Roman Reigns match. And that match was worse than the Roman Reigns match. That match was awful, and it was because of Goldberg. Goldberg knocked himself out. But for Undertaker to be involved with these matches that are not really all that good, some people will say, well, it's tarnishing his legacy. It's like, not really. There's guys who have had horrible matches in the later part of their careers. It doesn't really define who they are. Like, you're not going to look back and say, oh, the Undertaker's whole run from 90, 95, well, when he really started having good matches, it was probably like in 96. So when he had, I'm talking about really good matches as far as you can consistently look at him as a regular great performer. Because before then, in the early 90s, he was basically doing monster heel stuff where he was wrestling either a monster baby face, monster baby faces or monster heels, and he was not having the best matches in the world. But like in 96, he actually got to work with some good workers. He actually got to work with, people don't believe this, but the match with Diesel at WrestleMania 12 was really fucking good. And go back and watch that match. It's one of my favorite matches from my childhood because Undertaker was one of my favorite wrestlers, and I was not a big fan of Diesel. But I was definitely worried Diesel was going to win that match. But when he really started having good matches, it was like 95, 96, 97, 98, and up until he started getting hurt in the later part of the Attitude Era. Because, I think that actually did a more damage to his career than he's doing now, because the Ministry of Darkness Undertaker was not having great matches and was not, the character that everybody wanted him to be. And he looked out of shape, and he looked, kind of washed then, so it was kind of a surprise that he bounced back in 2004 and was able to come back and have that monster run that he had from 2004 to like 2010. That was, that rejuvenation was actually, that second win was actually better than what he was doing before, because the Ministry of Darkness Undertaker, as far as I'm concerned, and I know this is my opinion, it sucked. Okay. It was absolute trash. I don't like any match that he had as the Ministry of Darkness Undertaker. I hated all his matches with The Rock. I hated all of them. I didn't really like any of his matches with Stone Cold Steve Austin. I didn't really like any of those. I just, I think the Undertaker had those matches with Boss Man at the Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania. I didn't like that. It's like, I didn't like any of that shit. In the 2001, 2002 Undertaker, the American Badass, that was kind of cool. I like the heel version of it a lot more than the babyface version. But for him to leave and come back as the Dead Man in 2004, 2005, 2006 is when, the legend was back, because, it was it wasn't working in 1998, 1999. It was kind of like, okay, time to put the old dog out to pasture. But I think he was having worse matches and performances in 98, 99 than he's having now, and, he was more out of shape. He looked more out of shape then than he does now, but he's just older now, and there's nothing you can do about that. There's nothing you can do about it unless somebody finds the fountain of youth. And if you can find the fountain of youth, Ric Flair be there first. But I think that he's trying to wait for the perfect match to sign off on. And I think the Boneyard match would probably be the best match for him to walk off on. But Undertaker has these confidence issues too. And we see like this guy who's been in this business, who know the business backwards and forwards, to the point where he can mentor just about anybody on the business, is still having confidence problems because, like Ric Flair, age catches up with you. You can't do what you used to do. People are criticizing you harsher now. They're watching you more closely because, as you get up there in age, you're starting to tell people, hey, if I can't go, pull me aside and tell me. Like when you start having that conversation with people, you probably know that you're pretty much on the end. Like when you have to pull people aside and say, hey, look, if I can't go, pull the plug, then, you're pretty much at the end of your road already anyway. But, there was a lot of other fun things in this documentary. But those are the two major issues that I really wanted to talk about, was how vulnerable he was willing to be, admitting that he had all these self-esteem problems and that he doesn't feel like a tough guy anymore, that, this had to be it. His disappointment with, his match with Roman Reigns, the confidence issues that he suffered through. Those were the major selling points for me as somebody who was watching it. And then there was all the interesting stuff, them talking about him being a locker room leader, about it being something he didn't ask for, and that's something he didn't seek to do. It was just a situation that kind of formed naturally as he saw a need that needed to be filled, as far as somebody to take control of the locker room and see what's going on and be somebody, a mentor to all the people in the locker room. He kind of saw a need and he just decided to fill it. And, I thought that was really dope because it got to show that he had a really good relationship with people like Kurt Angle. And that's something that's very sort of underrated when Undertaker, with the Undertaker and all that type of stuff. It's the people that he might have been working with and working close to. Is that, we don't really know that many people. Like, we know stories of guys that he worked with that he would help. But there was, obviously, he worked with Kurt Angle. But I really only like one Kurt Angle Undertaker match. That's the No Way Out 2006 match, which is actually one of Undertaker's best matches ever. And I know that match was supposed to happen at WrestleMania, but because Angle was winning, they pushed it up to the February pay-per-view on SmackDown. But I like watching them interact with each other. I love that. That was the good stuff in this documentary, is watching him talk to Chris Jericho about how long the ramp was. And Jericho was surprised that the damn ramp was 80 yards. It's like, Jericho works there. I did not know how long the ramp is. But Undertaker's walking with like a noticeable limp at the time. So they're like, oh shit, how are you going to walk 80 yards, right? But I thought that was really great, seeing how close he is with Triple H, how close he is with Shawn and Vince. And that's the type of stuff that people tune in to see, is, to see the relationships. Some of the facts might be must or whatever, but people are really tuning in to see the backstage interaction between him and Vince. Like when Vince came into the locker room and said, "Why didn't you find me?" And, he was like, shit, I got as close as I could, but I need to see these doctors, you know what I'm saying? But I thought that was cool. And, a lot of people added a lot of color to the documentary, just basically reinforcing the things that he said. But there was somebody who nailed it, and I think Edge nailed it. And I've seen people do this a lot, but Edge said, like, watching Undertaker now is like seeing Brett Favre on the Vikings. And I said, holy shit. Because I remember what I said. I said Chris Jericho is like watching Joe Montana play for the Chiefs. Some people was like, it's like watching Michael Jordan play for the Wizards. And it's like, yeah, all of that is pretty much the same, except for the jersey hasn't changed. Like when it comes to Chris Jericho, I think it's more of an apt description because he's wearing a different jersey. He's working for a different team. Undertaker's playing for the same team. But it's like if Jerry Rice has stayed in San Francisco a lot longer than he should have. And I'm one of the biggest Undertaker fans in the world. And I'll even say that I think that he probably should have retired after the Roman Reigns match and not had any more matches. But ultimately, I think that that nailed it. Is that you see sparks of that old brilliance, but it's not there anymore. Like, well, it's there, but it's there in smaller quantities. And Undertaker says himself, like, he could go out there and do the greatest hits. He could do the entrance, he could do the choke slam, he can do the tombstone, and people would be happy that he came out there and did that. But he said he wouldn't personally be happy with it because it would be it kind of like it would be an admission that I can't do this anymore, and I probably shouldn't be doing this at all. But this is also, I think, one of the more mature things that he said. Is he said, every time I come out there, and this goes back to being a locker room leader, which I should have put this in that point, but I didn't. I don't really script things. I just kind of organize them in my head. But he says that every time he goes out there, he's taking the spot of somebody who's been working all year. And he says that he has a responsibility to represent that spot and make it worth him putting him on the card. And I think that's a very mature perspective to have. Because yes, us as fans may understand, oh yeah, Undertaker's going to be on the card. That means Apollo Crews is not going to be on the card. That means, Rusev is not going to be on the card. That means, that all of these young guys who probably should be there or have been working all year, they're not going to get the shot. But us as fans, we might not care that much. Like if you tell us like, oh, okay, if you give people a choice about, okay, well, we're going to book Undertaker versus somebody, or we're going to book Apollo Crews versus somebody, even the most complaining ass, cynical ass, bitter ass, jaded ass wrestling fan is not going to say, okay, yeah, well, give me Apollo Crews. Now they may pick somebody else from the heads of guys who aren't wrestling on the card, Shinsuke Nakamura, Cesaro, or somebody like that. They might be like, okay, well, I would rather have him than Undertaker. But there's a bunch of other guys who are also not going to be booked because Undertaker has to have his 5 or 10 minute entrance. But that's very mature as far as I'm concerned, because fans look at that too. They look at that as in so much as, why would 80-year-old Ric Flair keep getting big matches and you got Carlito sitting at home or somebody like that, and because people think that you care about that type of shit, but the mainstream audience doesn't give a fuck about Carlito. The mainstream audience doesn't give a fuck about Cesaro. You may care because you're in that wrestling bubble, but the mainstream audience doesn't give a shit about any of those people. So, I mean, ultimately, they don't give a fuck. They would rather have Undertaker on the card. But I think that he's starting to see it now. He kind of realizing that he is taking up main event spots and asking himself, is it worth it? And when it stops being worth it, and when he feels like there are other people who deserve that spot, he does not going to take it anymore. And I think that I think he's going to reach that point eventually. And I think he might already be there, which is why he's sort of doing all of his, all of this stuff now. So they talked about his last opponent, which is Roman Reigns. The documentary is written sort of to say that the match with Roman Reigns is the end. Now, he's had matches since the end, but this kind of feels like the end. Like he put, the hat and the coat and things in the ring, that it's over. There's no, that he said that, win, lose, or draw, no matter what my performance is, the Roman Reigns was the last one. And then he was so disgusted with that, he decided he was going to, he needs to redemption from that. And then he did the Bill Goldberg match, and that didn't work out. And then of course he had the little mishmash with John Cena, which turned out not to be a real match at all. And then he did, but the Boneyard match might be it. It might be the stamp on his legacy that he can say, okay, I can go out on this. But there's this desire for redemption that permeates through this story, that he kind of wants to prove, he wants to go out looking as good as he can, because he doesn't want to become a parody. But the thing is the longer it takes, the more the string of bad matches, the more the criticism comes, the more confidence that he's going to get damaged. But this is just episode 1. Like, we don't know what's going to happen in episode 2. But episode 1 was really dope. You probably need to watch it. You definitely need to watch it. And there's a lot of things in the documentary that I didn't mention that I think that is very good for people who might want to see it. Like the amount of injuries. He said he had to spend 2 days in a hospital, or 2 days in a hotel room, and get a hip replacement after the Triple H match at WrestleMania 27. So you see how the injuries are starting to build. So it's like, it's a pyramid. Everything is a pyramid. You start with your, if you write an essay or something like that, you start with your basic idea and you build from there. So that's basically what they did. They told the story from WrestleMania 27 when he had all these injuries up until 33. And it makes sense. If you pay attention to it, it makes sense. And you can see that he had been slowing down, and he had been, of course, losing a step and all that type of stuff, but you didn't see the psychological damage. And that's really what you got to see in this documentary, is how much it weighed on him psychologically to not be able to perform, and how it damaged his confidence. And now that he's, winding down near the end of his career, he's willing to open up more and break kayfabe and basically, be on social media and tweeting shit, which, I can't believe that. I can't believe he's tweeting. I can't believe he's tweeting. Anyway, go watch the documentary, come back, and then let's talk about it in the comment section. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel.